Okay, so this week you are going to get a lot of vocabulary thrown at you, and so today we're going to talk about the commutative and associative properties. Okay, the commutative property of addition just means that whenever you add one number to another number, the order does not matter. So 1 plus 3 is the same thing as 3 plus 1. The commutative property of multiplication is the same thing, you're just multiplying this time. So 2 times 5 is the same thing as 5 times 2. Okay, so it says use the commutative properties to rewrite the following expressions. So negative 1 plus 3 is the same thing as 3 plus negative 1. Now you might be asking, could I write that as 3 minus 1? Yeah, 3 minus 1 is the same thing as 3 plus negative 1. 4 times 9 is the same thing as 9 times 4. Okay, so associative property means that you're allowed to associate different things together and you will still get the same answer. So notice how on the associative property of addition, we've associated A plus B first, and on the right side of the equal sign, we associated B plus C first. So because of the order of operations, you have to do what's inside the parentheses first. This is telling you that if all you have in your problem is addition, it doesn't matter which two you do first. Same thing goes for multiplication. Okay, so using the associative properties to rewrite the following. We're not solving anything here, we're simply rewriting it. So on the top one, these two are associated first on the left side. So on the right side, I'm going to do 3 plus, notice I'm not changing the order of these guys. I'm just associating two numbers together to do in the problem first. Okay, so look at part B. So again, not changing the order of the numbers. I'm just changing where the parentheses are. And those are equal to each other. The left side is equal to the right side in both cases. Okay, this says to use the associative property of multiplication to simplify. So right now we've got the 3 and the x associated with each other. What this says is we are actually allowed to do this. And so then we can multiply the 6 times 3, and you get 18x as your final answer. Typically we don't show this step. I'm just showing you that it is allowed due to the associative property of multiplication. Okay, it says evaluate each expression when x equals 7/8. So that means I'm going to put 7/8 right here and right here. So watch what happens here. 7/8 plus 0.37 plus negative 7/8. Now, thanks to the commutative property, I'm allowed to add in any order, and look what happens whenever I add 7/8 plus negative 7/8. I get 0. Anything plus its opposite gives you 0. So now I can do this math pretty easy in my head, and I get an answer of 0.37. Okay, same thing goes down here. I'm going to put 7/8 in for this x and this x. And look, it winds up being the same problem, so I get 0.37 there. Okay, so look what happens here. We've got 4/3 times 3/4 times 17/1. But if I were to change my parentheses, like in part B, if I were to put my parentheses there, then notice how I get 1 here. Those become 1. 1 times 1 is 1. And 1 times 17 is 17. So sometimes the commutative property and the associative property help us do the addition or multiplication so much easier and quicker. Okay, so look at this problem here. Negative 84n plus negative 73n plus 84n. So if I use the commutative property and move this over by the other 84, so negative 84n plus 84n plus a negative 73n, notice how these two create 0. Negative 84n plus 84n creates 0. So my answer is simply going to be negative 73n. Okay, for this problem right here, if you'll notice, this one and this one are reciprocals of each other. And so what happens when you multiply reciprocals together? You get 1. So 7/15 times 15/7 times 8/23. This cancels this cancels this. I'm left with 8/23. And I didn't even have to grab my calculator. Okay, so in this problem, I want you to notice that the only thing that we have here is addition. That's the only two operations going on. And according to the associative property, you are allowed to move your parentheses when those are the only operations you have going on. So 5/13 plus 3/4 plus 1/4. It would be easier to associate these two together. So you would have 5/13 plus 3/4 plus 1/4 is 4/4, which is 1. Now, to add 1 to 5/13, you would get 1 and 5/13, but if you want an improper fraction, you could add 13/13, because that's the same thing as 1. So 5/13 plus 13/13 is 18/13, which is the same thing as 1 and 5/13. Okay, on this one, so moving our parentheses might be helpful again. So 6.47q plus 9.99q plus 1.01q. So if I were to move my parentheses around these two, that means I would perform this operation first. And I've got 6.47q plus 9.99 plus 1.01 is 11q. Now it's easy to add 6.47 to 11, and I get 17.47q as an answer. Okay, again, associating different things together because all we have in this problem is multiplication. So the associative property of multiplication says we're allowed to move those brackets if we want to. 1.67 times 8 times 0.25. The reason why I associated those together, the 8 and the 0.25, is because I can easily multiply 8 times 0.25. 0.25 is the same thing as 1/4. Multiplying by 1/4 is the same thing as dividing by 4. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. So I've got 1.67 times 2. Now this problem, it got slightly easier, not super easier, but a slightly easier. I can just do 1.67 times 2. And I get 3.34. The only reason why we do things like this is just to make our life easier and to hopefully minimize mistakes that we make. Okay, on a problem like this, again, I probably wouldn't show this intermediate step, but I want you to know that it is what's happening. So we would do 6 times 9 and then multiply that times x. So you would get 54x. Again, I really don't expect to see that step right there. On a problem like this, it's sometimes easier to move things around, sometimes not, but what I really want you to see is that it is what's happening. We just don't always have to write it this way and show this intermediate step. So I've got 18p, and next to that, instead of putting the q, I'm going to go ahead and move this by its like term. Plus 6q plus 5q. Now all I did was I wrote my like terms closer together. 18 plus negative 15 is a positive 3p, and then 6q plus 5q is 11q. Again, I don't necessarily expect to see that step right there where you write your like terms next to each other.